So this episode marks the beginning of a mini-series in Go Rails that I'd like to do that is going to talk about building a forum in Rails. So we're not necessarily building this to make the best forum in the world, but we're using this as our template to build out a bunch of different features that you'll probably use in other applications. So here, if you go to gorails.com, click on the forum link in the navigation, you'll be taken to a page like this that is the list of forum threads that we currently have. So this is for subscribers right now. So if you subscribe, you have access to the forum. And if you post questions on here, we'll contribute back. I'll be sure to post. And we'll discuss things like how you should design a feature, or how you should implement it, sort of what are the trade-offs of the ways you want to do things. So feel free to subscribe and join the forum and, ask questions. But this series is going to talk about how I built this and how we implemented search. What's the trade-off of the way we did it right now? How did we lock this down? And then, how do we go about making it flexible? So when you click on a post, you can see that we have avatars for users, and those avatars come from Gravatar. Another thing that we'll add in a future episode is uploading avatars through carrier wave. So you can default to something like Gravatar, but if they want to override it, you'll be able to upload your own photo. We're doing things like these times and dates here are actually presented using the local time gem, which takes UTC timestamps and then converts it to what your browser's currently in. So we're going to go through a lot of cool things, including markdown and syntax highlighting, like you can see here. And as we go build this out, you'll be able to see actually how I designed and developed the website that you can currently use. And that is hopefully going to explain lots of things about the thought process you want to use when you go through building an application like this. And you'll be able to take lots of these things because they're bite-sized chunks that you're probably going to use in a different application or in a different area. So the forum is a really good example of lots of these little features that you're going to want to have in other applications. So because I wanted to build this anyways, it made a perfect sense to create a mini-series out of it. So this first episode is going to be talking about building the architecture for the forum, which is going to include building the basic Rails application, designing the forum thread model, user model, and the forum post model, and moving from there. So we'll probably also talk about how to adjust things for performance reasons, like every time that you view a post, if you want to show the number of posts in there, view a thread rather, when you show the post, maybe we should cache that number, use a counter cache, and so on. So we'll go through a lot of different topics using this same application to explain it all. So this episode, we'll start now by jumping into the terminal and building our forum Rails app. So I'll put this up on GitHub and you'll be able to take a look as well as we build this out. And let's get started. Now the version of Rails we're going to use for this forum is going to be 4.2.0 beta 1. So I want to also cover sending email notifications in the application. So we're going to use active job for this, and then we're probably going to interface it with a gem, something like Sucker Punch or Sidekick, so that we can install that gem, run it on our server, and then the background workers will get processed using active jobs interface to that gem. So we'll get to take a look at some of the features in Rails 4.2 and implement them inside of our Rails app. So first, let's check to make sure that I have Rails 4.2.0 beta 1 installed, and I do. So let's create a new application. We'll call it the Go Rails forum. So once this gets all of the gems installed, we'll dive into the application and then start talking about the database models that we want to use. Okay, now that that's done, let's open up our application in MacVim, and I'm going to hop into this blank text file here, and let's talk about the models that we want. So the first thing I usually do when I'm building an application is I try and think about the database structure that I'm going to use in the application, and then sort of how it's going to work. And then that way I know what sort of controllers I need, what actions I need in there, and then the views and so on. So I sort of start from the model first and then build the rest out around that. So what models do we need? Well, the first model we need is definitely obvious. We need users. So forum really isn't much without users, and I'm going to use devise for this. So devise is just my sort of go-to gem for authorization. You're welcome to, if you're following along, you're welcome to use anything you want. They'll all pretty much work very similarly. You could build this from scratch as well, but just know that you're going to need an email address and password. Email for sure, because we're going to use that for Gravitars in the future episodes. So use whatever authorization or authentication mechanism you want. We'll use devise, so you'll probably get familiar with devise watching these screencasts. So the next thing we need is, well, if we go back to the, if we go back to the forum, the next model we can kind of see that we need is these threads. So each of these has a title and has many posts inside of it. So we need something to represent this larger picture of a thread. So let's call this a forum thread. Now, the reason why I'm going to call it a forum thread instead of just a thread is because I'm actually building this inside of the GoRails web app. And so this forum thread allows me to scope these names so that I know always that they're very closely related to the forum. So this also benefits you if you ever pull this out into your own Rails engine that could be used, or gem, and you pull this out into something like that that's reusable, that you want to put in many apps. You can use this, and it will always be safely sort of scoped into that that namespace there, so that you have the forum threads and so on automatically handled, and it likely isn't going to conflict with something you already have in your app. So these threads are going to have many posts inside of them, but first, of course, let's say I'm going to make better notes here. So we'll do users need at least an email, they need at least a password. And forum threads are going to need user ID, so we know who created the thread, and then we're also going to need to know the title or the subject of that. So I can't remember exactly what I use. Title and subject are almost interchangeable. You can use the one that makes sense for you. And then forum posts are going to be related to these forum threads. So this is going to have a forum thread ID, and then it's also going to have a user ID. So then we'll know who wrote that post, and then we're going to have a body, which will be a text field. So these will be integers, and the subject will be a string, and that's just the default, so we don't have to specify it, but for note taking it'll be better. So string and string here, and that's really all we need, because we have users. They will have many forum threads because of this, and that means that we can create the belongs to a user here. We'll have a has many forum posts, and that's because this belongs to a user, but it also belongs to a forum thread. So if you haven't been very familiar with associations in Rails yet, you'll notice that every time that I say there's a column on this model with an ID after it, so user ID and forum thread ID, that means that on that model you want a belongs to. And on the other side, you'll use a has many. So these don't have any columns to talk to the posts or threads, but we get that because it's the reverse of this association. So the belongs to is the important one. It means that the user ID or whatever underscore ID column is on that model, and then you can go to the other one and write a has many or has one. So here, because we got the has manys for these two, or for this and for this, we need to get the has many here for forum posts. So this is our associations that we'll have in our models once we create them, and that'll allow us to talk between all of them pretty seamlessly, and we'll have no trouble, building our queries and then displaying that in the forum. All right, so I'm just going to save this as the database structure, and I'm going to save this as the readme.markdown. So we'll start building the readme later and build this out as we go along and talk about sort of what this is, and so you can use this for reference later if you're new to Rails. So first thing we need to do is we want to install a couple gems. So you can see here's the new gem file by default for Rails 4.2. Things are a little bit different than you might be used to, but it's basically the same. So I'm going to install the devise gem. Let's grab the latest devise. And we've got 3.3.0, so we'll come back here, add 3.3.0. I'm also going to install the annotate gem, and we want just the latest version of that always. I'm also going to add the gem for better errors and binding of caller. So we'll have these three always available. I'm also going to make this a development only gem. And so I'm just going to add these to the bottom. You can organize this as you go along, but we'll use annotate so that you can see those sort of columns that we are going to create inside of a comment in our models. Better errors, you can check out the better errors episode if you're not familiar with that. But we'll go ahead and run bundle to install these gems. And there we go. And now we can run railsg annotate install to install the annotate functionality, so that when we automatically run a model generation, it will comment it for us. Then we'll run rails generate devise install, and this will tell us to do a few things which I'm going to get to later, but we won't do it right away. So then the next thing we'll do is railsg devise user, and we're going to install the user model. So I'm going to run another couple ones. So we'll generate those two models that we talked about. So we'll generate the forum thread, and this is going to have a user ID, which is an integer, and it will have a subject, which will be a string. And we got an error because this is probably not compatible with Rails 4.2 just yet. So the 3.3.0 version is most likely not fully compatible. And a quick Google search brought me to Rails 4.2 compatibility as an open issue on devise. So we'll be able to actually, it looks like, use a branch for this so that we can handle it as well. So we'll be able to use the branch, and then when they release that version, we'll be able to upgrade to that. And it looks like there's not good backwards compatibility with this latest version, so that's why it's taking a little bit longer. So we're going to install the devise gem from the master branch here, and so we'll say GitHub, and then we can take GitHub option here, takes this string from the URL, and then we can say the branch being, I'm going to do the lm rails-4-2 branch, because it looks like this is the one that we want to use for Rails 4.2 until it gets fully merged into master. So let's try running bundle again, and then we'll run the Rails generate install after this finishes. and we have the latest version of Devise. Alright, now that that's installed, let's run this Rails generate model command again, and it looks like it worked this time. So you want to currently use that lm Rails 4.2 branch. And next we can run Rails generate model forum post, and this is going to have a forum thread ID as an integer, a user ID as an integer, and a body which will be a text column. So now that all our models are generated, we can run rakedb migrate to create that database. And then we'll go into those models and create the associations like we did in our comment. So if you look in app models, you'll be able to see forum post, forum thread, and user. And we can say this has many forum threads, has many forum posts as well, and a forum thread belongs to a user and has many forum posts, and the forum post belongs to a forum thread and belongs to a user. So that wraps up this episode, and we've built the basic architecture for our forum, and next episode we're going to talk about building out the controllers, the actions, and the views for our forum in this mini-series. So I will see you next week when we dive into all of that.